None of VPM Partners, Bob Kendall, or any of its officers, directors, employees, other personnel, representatives, agents, or independent contractors is, in such capacities, a licensed financial advisor, a registered investment advisor, or a registered broker-dealer. None of VPM Partners or its personnel gives investment or financial advice or makes investment recommendations, nor are any of them in the business of effecting trades or directing client equity accounts or giving futures trading advice tailored to any particular client situation. Nothing contained in VPM Partners broadcasts, on its websites, or in its written materials constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, promotion, endorsement, or offer by others described above of any particular security, other investment product, transaction, or investment. Copyright 2014 VPM Partners. All rights reserved. Terms of use apply. Reproduction, adaptation, distribution, public display, exhibition for profit, or storage in any electronic storage media in whole or in part is prohibited under penalty of law.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is our first show doing the Process Warriors. We're pretty excited about this. The plan for today is that we're going to be, this is mostly philosophy, but talking about a lot of things that we've talked to a lot of you individually, but maybe not everybody's heard this, especially from me. I've had several people over the years work for me that did their best to communicate what we're going to start talking about. But initially, we're going to start talking about a dialogue on what a process is, start to go through all the steps from really from start to finish. And this is probably one of the most important parts, I think, in actually using VPM. One of the things that I think that a lot of advisors miss out on is understanding truly how to develop what you're thinking to get into the software. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation here. I'm just going to go over to the presentation itself. I've also got Mitch on the line, so he and I are going to interact. We're having trouble getting his remote video since he's in another state. We're still working on that. It's not reliable enough to do it, so he'll be here in audio form only. And I think as we go through this presentation, you'll start to get a really good feel for really the philosophy behind what I built this software to do for you folks. And I think it's actually broadly misused, and we'll talk about a lot of things when you're trying to be a good quality quant. And if you look at our fact sheets and other elements that we have out there that are purely quant based, you'll see characteristics that you can emulate walking forward as long as you continue with that process. And we'll talk about all the different elements as we go through. So let's go ahead and go to the first screen on this. And just what I'm talking about here is slightly covered up here. What is a process warrior, and what we're trying to get folks to do. I like a lot of movie quotes and those type of things. There's the old Top Gun when "Don't leave my wingman." That's when you do exactly what you're supposed to do. And that doesn't mean blindly following the signals and those type of things. It's really about developing an entire process that has been developed through understanding everything from the things you know, and we'll go through all the elements, but everything that you know, your belief systems, and ultimately who your customers and who you're targeting with your customers. The beauty of what VPM does is it actually gives you the ability to build a practice for anybody. It's not you have to use our strategies. We do have pre-built strategies, but even if you use those, you're able to tell a story around those strategies that will actually emulate things that you want to do in your practice. So as I was just discussing, the main thing we want to do today is do an introduction. I've done that a bit, what the show is going to be about. And we are going to be walking forward step by step, everything from building, maintaining, ultimately screening, building stock portfolios, every element possible. And this is going to be an ongoing segment. We plan right now on doing 2 segments next week. So this is the intro here in the middle of the week. Give us some time to prepare for some of these other meetings, but we want to be able to start off by getting everything going that we can so that you can walk forward. So as I was just mentioning, a process is not just the VPM buy and sell signals or the allocation signals. It's everything that goes around the practice and your products. And one of the things I've talked about for years is understanding and delivering this disciplined, structured product. And when you do that, there's a lot of elements that come out with utilizing VPM that's really going to help you to build your practice better and maintain relationships with your clients by the old classic word, walking your talk. So the first basics that we have, and I'll bring Mitch in from time to time, and we're just so he can actually come in and we can play off each other on some of these things. There's a lot of little elements that come in here, but the number one step is defining your process. What is that process? And we'll go through the steps here, but some of that might be as identifying belief systems, who your practice is, if you have a niche, what you're trying to do with your products. Number two is actually developing around that. And number three is developing, and there's actually one more step once you've done all this and you've deployed and get the process inside your practice, is maintaining and walking it forward. And those are really key elements. A lot of quants and people like myself, I've been doing quantitative modeling since 1991, actually, 1990 technically. 91 was the first full year that I did this. So I've been doing this for most of my career, and it's guided me through a very successful way of managing money for myself and for other people. So let's go ahead to this next step. And I think these are important, and this is where I'll start to bring Mitch into some of this. And I think what you believe is really important. And I've talked about this. I used to do a series of seminars across the country teaching people how to trade for themselves back in the days before VPM was certainly around, but even going back to Market Mind and any of the models that I built, I would go around and teach folks how to make discretionary trades. And discretionary trades is trades that you and I decide to do. And in fact, every time you make a decision outside of VPM, it's a discretionary trade. And we'll talk about some of the biases and things that come into that process. But what you believe is, in my opinion, the number one important thing that you need to understand, because if you build products, you try to do different types of processes that you don't believe in, you're not going to be successful. You need to find ways to do this. We now have the ability through some of the tools and different software pieces we have to do everything from an allocation system to what we call classic VPM, which is a dynamic modeling and allocation strategy. Ultimately, we have not found to this point a allocation model that will beat classic VPM in the end. We've even went against Goldman and some of the big boys and their allocation teams, and they can't beat us from that standpoint. And primarily because VPM's capable of waiting where it's going to be. But what you believe is really, really important. And if you get that, then you really can understand, I think, the next level, because ultimately, if you believe in what you do, you're going to be able to sell it, you're going to be able to walk it forward and adhere to the discipline. So the other, Mitch, do you have anything you wanted to add to what I just said?
Well, I think that's what you stated is right on. I mean, when we do the initial opener appointment or fact-finding appointment with any advisor that comes on board, one of the first things that we try to determine is, what do they believe and what do they know? Sort of going into that next point. When they come to us, obviously they came to us for a reason. They're looking for probably a shift in the way of their thinking from what they've been accustomed to. A lot of people were accustomed to a buy and hold mindset, and time has shown them that no longer works, at least not the way that they thought it was, and it's not effective for their practice. So in some cases, we find advisors, they're looking for a new belief. They need some solutions, some answers that we're able to provide for them. And then we have other advisors that have been trying to do this themselves for years, and they've come up with a couple things that work some of the times, but they're looking for a turnkey solution that's time tested, which VPM provides, that they can just turn that over to VPM that lines up with their beliefs. And I'd say one of the first things that we identify right away is, does what VPM does that line up with their beliefs? And once we communicate to them what it is that VPM does and the basis for it, it's like light comes on to people. It's like a new eureka type moment for these guys.
Yeah, so what Mitch is talking about, we do see that. And like I said, the nice thing is we can pretty much do different types of elements from MPT to the dynamics, even though ultimately it comes down to philosophy sometimes, And my goal when I started this company way back in 1997, the goal was to automate process. It wasn't to do things my way or no way, even though it still proves to be better in most circumstances. It doesn't matter when it comes down to running a practice and making sure that these philosophies are in line, because what happens all the time is you begin to deviate from the process, whether it's buying sell signals or you start making up allocation amounts, all those things. I spent nearly a year and in 7 figures over the years and just developing this software and understanding understanding what it takes to allocate money. We went through a lot of different iterations on how to do that. So there are things that are involved in the matching up of the belief system, and also comes down to what do you know. And Mitch and I were talking about this earlier before the show, and a lot of you folks maybe know mutual funds really well and maybe have embraced ETFs. As far as individual stocks, it's very foreign to you and very uncomfortable. We hope through the course of the next several weeks and months that we're able to show you how to really bring in pretty easily some of these strategies that are equity based. So what you know is important, what you believe is important, and then when it comes down to starting to define the actual process, there's some other elements, like who are your clients? What's the size of the typical client that you're handling? If you have $100,000 to $200,000 accounts, you don't try to run stock portfolios with maybe 25 or 35 stocks in there. It's just going to be a lot for the smaller accounts. Typically a 250 plus is best. If you build a portfolio for smaller accounts, then you end up having to have fewer stocks in there, which puts bigger bets and raises the volatility. So the point is what are the goals of the accounts and the customers that you have, and what type of accounts they have? Are they qualified, non-qualified, all those type of things. So one of the things that we strongly suggest that you do a review of your practice so you understand everything about it, and then you look at the practice and say, where would I like to go with the practice is the next step. And this has a lot to do with starting to define the process and ultimately the strategies that are going to drive these products that are going to go and get in place. And if you do this right, and we've got quite a few of you out there that have done this absolutely right, and it's pretty amazing to see it in practice, because the adherence, the discipline, and all the structure, it drives everything around it, and the confidence levels and the ability which to sell the process just goes through the roof. When you start to deviate and you're not working within those belief systems and the structure, you start to cause some issues. The other one, it mentioned here, there's what's your niche? And maybe you want to develop something new, and that's the other thing we can do. Because we have this automated process, we can help you to devise some strategy maybe that's going to go after different types of elements. We have folks that have done tremendous jobs with 401ks and those type of things. And one of the other parts, just to add in a little segue, is that we do plan on having advisors coming in that have been very successful and having call in and discuss some of the things that they've done, and hopefully we'll get this video issue carried in, because we can use Skype to bring in some things and show you what's going on. So Mitch, you have anything else to cover on that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I always think of when it comes to defining the practice is that initial discovery process that you mentioned. Since my background is actually running this within a practice, so I was responsible for the better part of $200 million of AUM across, surprisingly, almost 2,000 accounts. So we had to have certain processes in place to be able to